Okay, today's video will be on the Iron Furnace, Canoe Furnace, and this is a book I wrote called The Iron Furnaces of the Cove. And featured in this book are 10 iron furnaces that were situated in the Morrison's Cove area of Blair County. And on the cover here is Canoe Furnace, and this is the furnace we'll be discussing today. But in this book, on page 15, there's a section on Canoe Furnace. And if you're interested in the copies of these books, they're available at the Blair County Historical Society and the Blair County Genealogical Society, the Williamsburg Public Library, the Martinsburg Public Library, and on lulu.com. So let's go check out Canoe Furnace today. We'll go visit the site. Okay, this is an old geological map from 1895. It's the Blair County Genealogical Survey, Geology Survey, with amazing maps of different kinds of stone, coal, iron ore, and these maps are a great tool for me to understand where they were mining all their iron ore in Blair County. If you look at all the red marks, this is where they were digging for iron ore. And, Ormenia, Springfield Mines. Okay, today we are studying Canoe Furnace, which was built in 1838 and ran until 1848 by Henry S. Spang. And Henry S. Spang operated Mount Etna Furnace in Catherine Township. Now, this map was made in 1895, but the Canoe Furnace would have sat somewhere about right here, I believe, about somewhere right in here, because here's the Juniata River coming through the gap around Ganister area, and it would have sat right here on the corner on the property line of Frankstown Township and Catherine Township. So although Canoe Furnace isn't labeled on there, this is where it would have sat. And we got some iron ore banks around here on Short Mountain that would have been providing Canoe Furnace their iron ore. So let's go to the site and see what we can find. Okay, we're on the property line of Frankstown Township and Catherine Township, and we are at Point View Homes. It's a private community, and we will walk back in the woods here where Soap Fat Furnace is. Another name for Soap Fat Furnace would be Canoe Furnace, and we will walk back in the woods and find this awesome iron furnace site. Okay, we're in the woods on the way back to see the iron furnace, the former Canoe Furnace. And you can see we're standing on a bed of glass-like slag, all different colors. It's just everywhere. You can tell this is a slag dump. Really pretty. But yeah, we're basically walking on the slag dump. There's some iron. So we're close to the furnace here. There she is, Canoe Furnace. That is quite the sight. This is a very unique iron furnace. This is in Blair County on Frankstown Township and Catherine Township property. And this would have been built in 1838 by Henry S. Spang, and it would operate till 1848. It only operated for 10 years. Now, you can see it was a circular style iron furnace. Here's a retaining wall up back, and there would have been a large bridge across the top that would have went to structures up top there on that embankment. And you can see the whole front of the furnace just fell over. I will show you a picture of what it looked like probably about in the 1940s right now. Okay, we are standing directly inside the former iron furnace here, and you can see how the whole front just fell over, and all the rock are laying everywhere. So I've always noticed these, you know, the bottom here was kind of built over this iron bar here. This beautiful Ganister stone here lining this iron furnace. Standing on the side of the furnace here, you can see the stone wall that goes this way, and this might have been possibly where the water wheel sat to blow air in on the fire. So they would have got water off the creek over here and ran it through this raceway here, and there would probably been a water wheel sitting right in here, right beside the furnace, possibly right here, and it would have blew the wheel would have turned and blew air in on the fire using a pipe and bellows, and they would have sent the air into the furnace here to keep the fire hot. Like I said, this is an impressive structure. An iron furnace would have had a water wheel that would have took water off the creek using a raceway, and the creek is over here. So when they would build an iron furnace site, they had to find the best site for an iron furnace would be against an embankment or hillside. Okay, there's the obvious hillside. Iron furnace would sit below the hillside. There would have been structures behind the iron furnace, such as a bridge and a barn, and that way the men could load iron ore at the top, limestone, and charcoal, where they could send it down inside the furnace, and the iron ore would smelt at 2,500 degrees or 3,000 degrees, and they would make pig iron. And that would have been, they would have basically made molten hot iron, where they would collect it out of the bottom of the furnace in metal castings, and the liquid iron would cool and they would have like what they would call ingots or bars of iron, and they would take those bars of iron to forges and foundries where they would make products. And that's how the iron master would collect his money. Well, I couldn't find where the water raceway came across this creek. The hard thing about this site is this furnace, Canoe Furnace, went out of blast 187 years ago. So the landscape has changed since then. But this would have been the obvious water spot where they would have got their water off of. And talking to another local historian, the reason why Canoe Furnace only lasted 10 years, partly the reason was this creek didn't provide a lot of, you know, good water power. It struggled to create the water power to give enough force to the water wheel to create good air power, and it struggled at times. So that was one of the factors why this furnace only lasted so long. Another factor was Henry S. Spang, around 1848, 40, his health started to decline, so he might have decided to close it up for his health. And also they might not have been that productive here. So they ran Mount Etna Furnace, which was not far up the street, and maybe, I believe, they might have wanted to just concentrate all their focus on Mount Etna, and maybe this furnace wasn't doing as well as they thought. That's probably why it only lasted 10 years. When you see a furnace like this today, you have to really imagine and use your visualize, and also old maps help. But there would have been an entire series of structures around this furnace to support the operation. They would have had a room out front where the men would get their iron out of the furnace. They would have, some kind of dinky tracks along here for the men to transport the iron out, whether it was horse and wagons or mules or dinky tracks. They would have had buildings up top, buildings on the side for the water power. They would have had a building for charcoal storage, because this required charcoal as a heat source to operate the furnace. Looking at the front of the furnace here, a waste product out of the iron furnaces would be slag, and I showed you some of that coming in. But all around an industrial site where they're making iron or steel, you're going to find slag. And what you have here is charcoal slag. It's more glass-like. This is more colored slag, and you'll find that with the old charcoal blast furnaces. And whenever you would put the iron in, the iron ore rock in and the limestone, and you would heat the furnace to 2,500 degrees, the liquid iron would be extracted using the limestone as a flux, and the flux, the limestone flux would pull the impurities out of the iron ore, and all the waste would be this slag, and the hot molten iron would come out at the bottom, and the slag would float to the top. After they extract all the iron, the slag would be next. They would pull the slag out of the furnace using hot dinky carts or wheelbarrows or whatever they used early on. But they would typically just come across and dump the slag below the furnace site somewhere. And let me show you a site where they would dump it at. Right along the creek here, you can find a slag dump. And you'll see piles of slag all along the creek here that they would basically just dump it below the site. And you'll find slag even down in the creek. And along riverbeds, you'll find slag, you know, from hundreds of years later from the iron making days. Like I said, this is a very impressive furnace, and these structures, they're not around much. I mean, Pennsylvania had 231 iron furnaces, and the very first furnace was, I believe, in Virginia. When the colonists were, you know, getting set up, they, you know, brought their iron making skills from Europe and Germany, and where, you know, across the ocean, they brought them here. So around 1620, I believe, was the very first iron furnaces in a settlement in Virginia. And around the Revolutionary War in the 1700s, they started popping up everywhere. And America was really building up, and they needed iron. And iron was making lots of tools, farm equipment, cultivating, plows. They were making early wagons, wheels, wrought iron, construction beams, nail spikes, you know, weaponry, all sorts of uses. Back in the 17 and 1800s was made by pig iron. And early on, these early charcoal blast furnaces really helped build the Industrial Revolution here in America. Another interesting fact about Canoe Furnace here is they got the nickname Soap Fat Furnace. The workers at the furnace here would be fed meals by the workers that would, you know, they would make breakfast and lunch, and, you know, so everyone had a part here in the community, because the communities were all revolved around these iron furnaces. So the workers would eat bacon here, and they complained it tasted like fatty, and they complained it tastes like soap. So they nicknamed the name Soap Fat Furnace. That would have been another name for Canoe Furnace, would have been Soap Fat Furnace, and that name stuck around for a long time. So it's kind of a joke with the workers here. It's kind of humbling yet kind of sad, you know, seeing these old iron furnaces. There's not many standing. In Blair County, there's only 6 partially standing in ruins, and this is one of them. And out of the 16 in Blair County, only 6 are standing. And you come to a remote site like this, and it's hard to imagine that almost 200 years ago, this site would have been very industrial, with lots of people here working, and, you know, creating a village in the community, and a place that we, you know, our ancestors started, and it was a very important part in Blair County. And these industrial sites are now reclaimed by nature, and there's nothing but some ruins and some old roadways. So let's go take a look down these roadways. Iron ore probably fell off the wagon on the way to get smelted. Iron ore is very common here in the Juniata region, along the Juniata River, and iron ore is very available commodity here in Blair County for making iron. Okay, so back in the day there probably would have been a bridge across here, but this looks like would have been one of the main roads coming through the furnace site, and they would probably have been hauling charcoal through here, iron ore, pig iron, and all along these hills would have been houses and structures, maybe a grist mill, blacksmith shop, village workers' houses, everything to make a community. And there's nothing here now, but let's walk along and see what we can find. As we take one more look at Canoe Furnace, this is on private property. I'm friends with one of the members on the association here at Point View Homes, and they allowed me to come down here, and I really appreciate them letting me see this site, and they really appreciate the history here as well, so they don't mind me documenting it. But I always want everyone to know, if you are going to come see a site like this, make sure you get permission to see the site. A lot of times you'll probably get permission more than you think, so just be respectful and ask for the permission. Okay, one more good look at this beauty before we leave. Canoe Furnace, 1838 to 1848, built by Henry Spang. And when they closed this site around 1838, this area would have sat idle, and around 1849 or 1851, Henry Spang would die, and his boys would sell his Mount Etna property and all this property to Samuel Islet, and Samuel Islet would become the new Iron Master. I believe, by seeing old articles in the newspaper, he probably just ran this mountain for resources, charcoal, and eventually I believe he would sell off some of the rights of the Ganister to the Ganister King, John Manning, and Jesse Hartman. But this property would sit idle, and eventually, later 1800s, above here, they would develop this site called Point View Homes, and we will go check that out next. This is beautiful Point View Homes, and this development was put in the late 1800s, and this is overlooking the Juniata River, which the Juniata River is down through there. You can't see it because of the trees, so maybe you can right through there. But at one time, the developer would dam this river here and turn it into a lake. So Point View Homes would become a luxurious destination for beautiful homes overlooking this really nice lake at the time. And I'll show you pictures of what that looked like. Beautiful Point View Homes. This area was built up in around the 1880s, and it was a really beautiful destination that would overlook the Juniata River that runs through there, and across the street here would have been a large lake because they dammed the river, and we'll show you what that looks like here in a second.